I want to ask you another riddle on this week's Torah reading, Vayechi. Which expression from this Parsha was used to name a very important halachic book, a commentary on Shulchan Aruch, written by a very prolific writer, a Sephardic Rabbi, approximately 200 something years ago, more than 200 years ago? And the answer is Birkei Yosef. So, at the very end of our Parsha, it says that Yosef saw his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They were born literally al Birkei Yosef. Whatever that means, on the knees of Yosef. Was he actually participating at the time of birth? Or is it hinting at the time of Brit Milah? It's known that the position that Ashkenazim call Sandak, a special person who is holding the baby at the time of Brit Milah on his knees. And the Mohel is doing the circumcision, and the person holding is almost as important a position. Some even say it's a greater position. There are some Ashkenazic rabbis, especially among some Hasidic groups, that think that it's a greater honor to be a Sandak than to be a Mohel. Whatever the case may be, it's not exactly clear. The expression Yuldu al Birkei Yosef, they were born on Yosef's knees, whether we should take it literally, or it's more of an expression that basically when the children were born later, they were playing, Yosef would hold them on his knees. But the expression Birkei Yosef became the name of a book by Chida. I'm going to talk about it in a moment, but I want to mention another interesting idea also in this week's Parsha in terms of the knees of Yosef, the knees of Yaakov possibly. We know that when Yaakov was blessing his children, it also mentions the knees somehow, but it's not clear whose knees. If you look in the 47th chapter, 48th chapter, the 11th verse says that Yaakov told Yosef, I didn't even hope to see you, and here Hashem let me see even your children. And after that, in the 12th verse, it says, and Yosef took out them from, I guess, between the knees or from on the knees. So Rabbi Kaplan, in his commentary, Living Torah, brings two opinions. Whose knees is it? From between his, as he calls it, from his father's lap, meaning before that the children were on his father's knees, and then Yosef took them out so that the father could bless them, or from between his own knees. They were somehow near Yosef at this time. Now this lands us, this brings us to a subject I discussed in a different video, which you could see on my channel, whether this all happened when the children were small, whether this whole story happened long before the beginning of this week's Parsha. And here the Torah may be using non-chronological order, as I mentioned, because it sounds like these were little children. If they were in fact over 20 probably at the time when Yaakov was already in his last days before he died, by that time Menashe and Ephraim must have been close to 20 or over 20 years old. It doesn't sound like they would be on the father's lap or between his knees, but could be that this expression is not to be taken literally. Again, they were just standing there next to him. But what's interesting here is with regards to Birkei Yosef, is that the word berech, knee, kind of reminds us of a different word that seems to have the same root. It could be a homonym, and that is the blessing, livarech, right? Bet, resh, chaf is obviously the word that's mostly used for blessings. So it turns out there may be actually a relationship between the two. I mean, one thing that comes to mind, of course, is that a lot of times people fall on their knees or used to fall on their knees when they do the blessing. But what's interesting, as I mentioned in the name of Rashbam in a different video, I think this video was made a few weeks ago and it's also available on this channel, and that is that when the Torah says about, for instance, Avram and later about Yaakov, v'nivrechu becha, that the families of earth will be blessed through you. That's how Rashi and most commentators would translate this. Rashbam, he's the grandson of Rashi, actually would suggest that the same root, Beit Resh Chaf here, actually comes from a different word. And there is this word that the rabbis love to use for some kind of grafting, some kind of use of one plant to make a hybrid with another plant. I guess because you bend it down to the other plant, maybe that's why it's similar to the bending down of one to the other. This grafting procedure is called bricha. Mavrich is one branch of an existing tree that's put in the earth, so it grows as a new tree. So according to this, what is the meaning? All the families of the earth will be mixed through you, meaning through the Jewish people, I guess through the converts, all the families will be united. All kinds of people from all over the earth will join the Jewish people. So that's the opinion of Rashbam and his Kuni with regards to V'nivrechu Becha. And as I mentioned, it could be that all of these meanings of Berech are related. The Ni meaning, the grafting, and of course the blessing. Now coming back to the book called Birkei Yosef. What book is it? So the truth is, Chida, Rabbi Haim Yosef David Azulai, that's his abbreviation, Chida, was one of the greatest Sephardic scholars, and he wrote on all kinds of topics, and his main commentary on the Shulchan Aruch is called Birkei Yosef, but there is also a few kind of additional commentaries to that commentary, more additional information that he published separately, like the book Machazik Bracha, for instance. It's the continuation of Birkei Yosef, kind of. There are additions today, the new editions that they published with many volumes, a whole shelf, basically, of Birkei Yosef, together with all its additions, all the Kuntra Saharon and Machazik Bracha and all the other additional things that Chida wrote. So this book is quoted very well by both Ashkenazic and Sephardic rabbis. Mishnah Berurah alone quotes it hundreds of times. I would say that Chida was probably one of the most influential Sephardic rabbis of all times, after Rabbi Yosef Karo and before Ovadia Yosef, who is extremely influential in our day. Probably the most influential rabbi, maybe also Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Haim from Baghdad. These are probably some of the most famous Sephardic rabbis. As an extra bonus, I want to mention one of the psaks of Chida, which today most Sephardics do not follow. But it's an interesting psak. He argues with the author of Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, in that Rabbi Yosef Karo does not permit women to make blessings on the mitzvot that they don't have to fulfill. For instance, blowing the shofar or picking up the Lulav on Sukkot. So Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the Chida, does allow, he bases himself on a Tshuva Min Ha-Shamayim, what's called. There was a certain collection of Tshuvot where one of the Balei Tosafot was able to ask, apparently in a mystical way, through dreams, as he calls it, Tshuvot from heaven. It's a unique collection of Tshuvot where it's not the proofs from the Talmud that he brings, but what he was told, based usually, the answers are usually cryptic, and a lot of times contain verses or quotes from parts of verses, but you could usually understand what the answer he was getting. So this Shailot v'Tshuvot Min Ha-Shamayim, Responsa from Heavens, was a very influential book, and Chida apparently held that it overweights even the psak of Rabbi Yosef Karo. So that's why he says that if Rabbi Yosef Karo saw that from Shamayim, from heavens, the answer was that women can make blessings on the mitzvot that they don't have to do, then Rabbi Yosef Karo would agree with it. As I mentioned, very few Sephardim today follow this, and indeed Rabbi Yosef Karo and many others, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef and many others, of course, argue with this approach and do not think that Rabbi Yosef Karo would have changed his mind even if he saw Shailot v'Tshuvot Min Ha-Shamayim. And on this I will end. If you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.